Let me ask you something. When was the last time you genuinely pictured yourself 10 years from now? Not a weak fantasy, not a maybe tomorrow, not a maybe someday, a real, believable tomorrow. If you're struggling to answer, you're not alone. Because something strange is happening to an entire generation. Not burnout, not laziness. Something quieter, something deeper. The feeling that tomorrow isn't solid anymore. We wake up to climate countdowns, watch AI learns faster than we can adapt, scroll past wars, layoffs, collapsing economies, all before breakfast. And slowly, without noticing, we stop emotionally investing in the future. We plan weekends, we plan next month, but 5 years ahead, that feels fictional. Here's the twist: this isn't personal failure, it's a psychological adaptation to an unstable world. And it's reshaping ambition, relationship, identity, even the way we find meaning. So today I want to explore a phenomena most people feel but almost nobody can name. No future syndrome, not to give you easy answers, but to understand what happens when an entire generation stop believing in tomorrow. Have you noticed something strange about how we think about the future? Not in dramatic end of the world way, in quiet everyday movement. Planning next weekend feels normal, next month feels doable, but 5 years ahead, that suddenly feels unreal. Like writing a story about someone else. Most people assume that means laziness. No motivation, no focus. But that explanation is too simple and almost wrong. Psychology has a name for this: temporal discounting. When the future feels uncertain, the brain decides long-term reward aren't worth the risk. Not because you don't care, because the mind doesn't trust tomorrow to stay stable long enough to repay the effort. Online culture calls it something else: no future syndrome. Not a diagnosis, not a trend, a shared experience. A generation that no longer emotionally believes in the long-term future. Not pessimism, not hopelessness, just a quiet detachment from tomorrow. And once you see that, everything else makes sense. Why ambition feels heavy, why commitment feels risky, why scrolling feels easier than striving. That isn't a personality flaw. It's a psychological response to the world that stopped feeling predictable. And to understand how we got here, we need to remember a time when tomorrow felt real. To understand why this feels new, we need to look backward for a moment. Not to glorify the past, life was harder, work was harder, inequality was real. But one belief held everything together. Effort today would lead somewhere tomorrow. Grandparents saved for homes they expected to own. Parents climbed job ladders they trusted would last. Students chose careers would still exist years ahead. Students chose careers assuming those careers would still exist years ahead. The future felt like a solid road. You might struggle on it, but it was there. Sociologists call this a progress narrative. The belief that tomorrow will be bigger, better, more stable than today. And stories matter. Because when people believe in future, they invest in it. They plan, they commit, they endure discomfort for long-term payoff. Even when the system wasn't fair, the belief itself created motivation. But that story has started to dissolve. And when the story of progress collapses, the minds begin rewriting how it lives. So the question becomes, what happens when tomorrow stops feeling trustworthy? So what changed? The world didn't just get harder, it became unpredictable. Every day your phone delivers the same quiet message: long-term plan might not survive long-term reality. Climate clocks counting down, AI learning faster than we can adapt, jobs disappearing without warning, housing priced out of reach, economy swinging overnight, relationship forming and vanishing in a swipe. None of these alone would break belief in the future, but together they send one constant signal: nothing stays stable for long. Psychologists call this learned uncertainty. When the environment feels volatile, the brain stops trusting delayed rewards. It shifts into survival mode, short-term thinking, short-term planning, short-term comfort. Neuroscience supports this chronic uncertainty, raises stress level, and stress weakens the brain ability to build long-term goals. And once trust in the future erodes, everything begins to recognize around the present, which leads us to the next adaptation, the retreat in the short-term living. When the brain stops trusting the future, it doesn't shut down, it adapts. If tomorrow feels unstable, the safest place to live is right now, and that's exactly where modern life pulls us. Short videos, quick notification, instant deliveries, fast relationship, one-tap entertainment, one-scroll distraction. Each offers a small immediate reward, a tiny moment of certainty in an uncertain world. Not because we are weak, because the nervous system is choosing what feels safe. Behavioral scientists call this variable reward looping. Unpredictable rewards keeps us checking, scrolling, refreshing, not for pleasure, for relief. Dopamine isn't the happiness chemical, it's a anticipation chemical. And when long-term anticipation feels risky, the brain hunts for short-term anticipation instead. So ambition shrinks, patience thins, long project feels exhausting before they begin. Not because we lost discipline, but because the world taught us not to bet on distant outcomes. The future didn't just disappear, we learned to live without it. And that adaptation has emotional consequences. When life reorganizes around the short term, it doesn't just change habits, it changes how we feel about ourselves and each other. Ambitions start to feel naive, dream job feels like a lottery ticket, long-term goals feels like stories from another era. Commitment becomes risky. Why invest deeply in a career, a relationship, and identity if the world around us keeps shifting? So we keep options open, stay flexible, avoid locking in. Relationships became lighter, friendships go digital, romance becomes swipe and temporary connections. Even identity becomes editable, a profile, a vibe, a phase, something we can change when the world changes again. And then there's humor. A generation raised on uncertainty learns to laugh at everything. A generation, not because life is funny, not because life is funny, but because irony is. But because irony is emotional armor. If you joke about everything, nothing can break you. At least that's the strategy. None of this is accidental. These are emotional survival responses to a world that stopped promising permanence. But beneath it all, a deeper question begins to emerge. What happens to meaning when tomorrow no longer feels guaranteed? Here's where everything turns, because when the future collapses, it doesn't just affect planning or motivation, it challenges meaning itself. For a moment of human history, meaning was future-based. Work now, built later. Struggling today rewards tomorrow. Plant tree you may never sit under. But what happens when tomorrow feels unreliable? When the mind quietly believes there's no stable horizon ahead? That's when an uncomfortable question appears. If the future no longer pulls me forward, what am I living for right now? This is existential moment, not depression, not despair, just the realization that meaning was never guaranteed. It was borrowed from the promise of tomorrow. Now the promise is fading. So this generation isn't just losing faith in the future, it being forced to face something older, deeper, more honest. Meaning was never given, it has to be created. And that leads us to the final shift. It's easy to look at this generation and say unmotivated, distracted, emotionally distant, but that diagnosis misses the point. When an environment changes, organisms adapt. Not perfectly, not beautifully, but efficiently. If the old world rewarded long term sacrifices, people built long term dreams. If the new world punishes long term certainty, people build flexible lives, shorter plan, portable skills, multiple identities, relationship that can shift, dreams that don't break when the system does. This isn't weakness, it's evolutionary logic. A generation learning to survive in volatility. So maybe the question isn't why don't they believe in the future? Maybe the real question is what kind of future could earn their belief back, because the old story of progress is gone and something new will have to replace it. Not a return to the past, but the invention of a different tomorrow. So where does that leave us? A generation that doesn't fully trust future, a world that shifts faster than a certainty can form, a mind trained to live in fragments of the present, not broken, not hopeless, just awake to instability. And maybe that's the real turning point. Because when the old future disappears, we faced with a rare moment in human history. The chance to ask what kind of future is actually worth believing in. Not inherited, not promised, not assumed, but chosen, designed, built different than before. If the future is no longer guaranteed, what kind of meaning will we create instead?